documenting the front lines of the AI revolution, the AI Rebels podcast.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. It's just me and Jake today. Jake, what's on your mind today?
Oh, Spencer, always things on my mind. All right, well, just this is kind of a funny thing. I feel like saw a couple articles about this, and I've just been chuckling to myself about how Mark Zuckerberg has somehow done this huge rebrand where not only is he suddenly a mixed martial arts bro, he's also an AI visionary. And I was like, he's totally like encroaching on Sam Altman's territory here. All of a sudden, he's like, I see the future for AI, and Sam Altman's like, bro, you're way late to the party. And then Mark Zuckerberg's like, I'll break your arm. Okay.
And here's the thing: is like I wouldn't bet against. So I still think that there's a lot of people who are think that OpenAI is kind of headed for irrelevancy ultimately. I'm not one of those, but if anyone is going to just completely kick their trash and kick them to the curb, it would be Facebook. It would be Meta. Like
Yeah,
Zuckerberg is ruthless. Like he is he's rebranded to be his image to be a lot softer, but like he's a ruthless executive.
He's a shark. He's a shark, man. Yeah, he doesn't mess around. I'm curious. You mentioned some people think OpenAI is headed towards irrelevance. Why is that?
So there's a couple things. Recently, there's been a lot of high-profile departures from the OpenAI team. So, for example, Mira Murati, who was, I think, their CTO. I don't remember her exact role right now. But she had been on from the very beginning. So pretty much like the only person left from the founding team of like I think there was like 5 people who founded it. I can't remember, I could tell you their names off the top of my head, but I don't remember all of them for sure. But anyways, it was like Ilya Sutskever, Greg Brockman, Sam Altman, Mira Murati, and one other that I'm forgetting, I feel like. But anyways, the only person left now is Sam. And so there's some people who have pointed to that to say like, hey, like I think that Sam has made a little bit of a power play and pushed everybody out. And generally, companies where that happens it generally doesn't bode well for the company. I don't really see it that way. Obviously, for some of them, they have come out directly and said like, hey, I left OpenAI because I had these kinds of disagreements with them. I'm going to Anthropic because I think we even retweeted one the other day on our podcast account. And so I think that there are, I don't think that the naysayers are without credibility per se, because obviously those are some concerning signs potentially on how you interpret them. But I still feel like there's they still have a ton of researchers there.
And there's so many resources, and this money they just raised. It's just.
No, exactly. And then Sam Altman is like, he's a shark too. Like there's that famous, I think it was Paul Graham. I can't remember who said it about him, but basically like, if you drop Sam Altman off on an island full of cannibals, like and come back in 3 years, he'll be the king or whatever. I feel like that's probably pretty true. Cause like he's now outlasted the board and all of the other executives who tried to get him pushed out last year. So dude's got some sort of charisma magic or something.
Somehow. What do they call it with maybe not totally the same thing, Steve Jobs, like the reality warping field.
Yeah, exactly.
Bends reality to his will.
Oh man, some of the stories about Steve Jobs. I could talk about that for a whole podcast, but it's probably not relevant. Like I don't love that dude. Like he's not a good role model, but he
also is
endlessly fascinating. Yeah. Endlessly fascinating. And if you take very specific lessons from his life, they're very good lessons. But Man, he was he
Also,
wild.
don't be like him.
Um, yeah, exactly. Moving on. So this was actually a while ago. It's longer ago than I thought. Time flies. But did you see that Google got uh, the game Doom running on a diffusion engine?
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is it's crazy. Because I mean, like the whole thing with AI is it's technically stateless, and so state in programming, excuse me, parlance refers to just like the variables that make up a program. So it's like if you are typing a Word document, you'll have there'll be a variable that holds references to the words that you've typed and where they
Hmm.
etc. And so it's super interesting to see this happening with a diffusion engine because it has to infer the state of the game from the previous frame to generate the
Yeah.
next frame. Um, and people have pointed out like some oddities with it. So for example, like like projectiles will appear out of nowhere and hit you. But it's crazy to see how far it's come already because I remember people speculating about this back in I don't know 2021 something like that.
Hmm.
Right when like Mid Journey and like the early AI image models started coming out, like hey, like how cool would it be if one day you could just run an entire game this way?
Yeah.
Um, which begs a question like, are game developers about to go out of work?
I know, but that's where because like you would still need to somehow build, or is it all user based? Like you just come and you say, I want to play a game based on this book, and it just takes it and runs with it and creates the world, creates the characters, creates everything. I don't know. It'll be interesting to the role, or maybe game engineers become more, more expert prompt engineers and use that to build a world, and then people can pay to enter it.
I think another thing we'll see too is not necessarily directly like, oh, we'll run all of our games inside of a diffusion engine and that's how we're going to build our games. But I would bet that we start seeing a lot of these like a text to game interface like you're describing implemented with
Hmm.
Fortnite. Um,
Oh, interesting.
because I don't know if you've paid attention to Fortnite, but it's much more than Fortnite now. It's an
Yeah, I
entire
haven't kept tabs on it.
it's nuts now. So it's an entire game platform of its own. You can build Lego Fortnite games inside of there. You can
Hmm.
it's insane. And like I think that they're gonna be the final video game in a lot of
Really?
ways.
Like they are the
Yeah, like they've
one.
just yeah, exactly. Like they've just dominated the space and they are better positioned than anyone to take advantage of stuff like this because they have
Hmm.
incredibly in depth like user creation tools. Like if
Yeah,
you wanted to, you could go make a living just creating maps for Fortnite. Um,
that's insane.
and if yeah, it's becoming a whole like it's like Fortnite and Roblox are going to be the two games of the next
Yeah,
generation.
right. And it's its own
And
ecosystem. That's nuts.
yeah, exactly. And it's like and I think they really won out by merit of just being around when generative AI began its rise because they're both built on
Hmm.
platforms that are already geared toward user generated content.
Yeah,
Um, super easy to slip some AI in there and find a really good use for it.
yeah, yeah,
I kind of envy I kind of envy Tim Sweeney, like the CEO of Epic. Like
yeah.
that dude
They
had the right
somehow
timing.
crushed it. Yeah, it's very impressive. I'll be very curious to see if we end up with just like you have a login, you enter the platform, and the AI can just build whatever you want to play, you know? And you can ask it to base it on previous games. Like maybe the winner in this race with AI games is just the company with the most licenses to other games because you could just come in and say, "Hey, I want to play I want to play a game like this and like these two games blended. And if they have a license to them, they can just like grab, blend it, you know?
And that's another reason why I think Fortnite has just won forever, because they have so many licenses. Like you can go play as Thanos, and you can fight
Easy.
Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure exactly how many of these licenses are like in perpetuity, and how many of them are like, hey, like for 6 months, put a Thanos character in the game.
Yeah.
But still, like they have all those relationships, they have all that IP. Um, they are so well positioned right now.
Yeah. It'll be,
It's
I'll be very, it would take an underdog building just like a crazy engine to even, I don't know. They just have so many resources. Yeah.
no,
I totally see
exactly.
what you're saying. So
Yeah, and like
that'll be
yeah,
fascinating.
it's gonna be a weird world.
Yeah. Well, and then kind of like what we're seeing with like AI art, I wonder if you'll even need licenses if you make it different enough. Like if your
Yeah,
engine can just go out and be like, let me watch a video of this game and that game and create one that's new enough that I'm not encroaching on any licenses here.
here is a
That,
legally distinct elf
yeah,
character in a green tunic and a sword.
exactly. Like that'll be fascinating. I wonder. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I bet in the next 6 months to a year there will be some big progress in this realm.
And this touches on another thing that I quickly want to talk about. A drum that I beat often on this show. The death of intellectual property rights. um,
Yeah.
Obviously, there will still need to be some form of intellectual property rights, right? And I am not quite well versed enough on the subject to know exactly what that is, but I am well versed enough to know that it's basically irrelevant now. No matter what
Mm-hmm.
safeguards you put inside of AI, um, you can still, like, even if it touches any copyrighted images, or non copyrighted, because it's like there's probably there's fan art of Zelda out there that is
Mm-hmm.
not under copyright, right? And I'm sure that some of that made its way into the training data.
Right.
Um, it's you can't meaningfully enforce copyright at like the model level. It's just you can't
Right.
meaningfully do it. Um, but it's also hard to you can't really legislate it at like the generation level either.
Yeah.
I think it's just
Like how
it's
do
a
you
new
deal with
world,
it?
and people are just going to have to accept that um, AI generated content has essentially made current copyright laws obsolete. Um, and there's a whole host of second order effects there that should be considered. Um, but like the fundamental thing that I have always believed since first touching Chat GPT is like, holy shit, like copyright is dead.
Like it's gone. It's done. Yeah. I mean, you just
um,
can't enforce it.
no, you can't. And I don't think that people have reckoned with that just yet. Uh, they're going to. They're going to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
on a similar note, um, one thing that I've found interesting in talking to people. So yesterday I was at a family party with my wife, and I was talking to her cousin there, and her cousin was like, "So, like, they all know that I'm into AI," and she asked me about AI and impacts on the environment. Um, And so I told her that, like, most of like the criticisms of AI with regards to environmental concerns are really overblown, right? Because it's like, people make it out to be that every day these data centers are taking in new water and, fouling it up and then releasing it back to the river or whatever. When in reality, most of these data centers operate on a closed loop system where it's like, they intake water at the construction of the facility basically, and then that's pretty much the water they use for the rest of the lifespan of the facility.
Right.
And then second, like, people complain about like the energy usage of AI, but it's tiny in relative to total energy, used both in the US and worldwide.
Yeah.
It's like less than 2%, something like that. I don't remember the specific numbers. But that led me to another thought, which is that I don't think that a lot of, and this is another drum that we've beat many times on the show, but I don't think that most people realize what's coming. And I think that they're focused on the wrong problems right now that they see with
Mm.
it. It's like they're distracted by the climate concerns, stuff like that, or
Yeah.
the fact that it can, generate furry art that, now people on DeviantArt can't sell their furry art for $300. That's a really ungenerous take of it on my part, but it's what I've seen on social media so many times. It's like you see the people complaining about, AI generated art being terribly fake art. And it's like you go look at their profile and
Yeah.
they're drawing dragon girls with enormous figures,
Yeah.
very voluptuous.
Yeah.
I'm not really mad that your
You know
niche has
what?
been taken
Yeah.
over.
I don't think the world's a worse place for this.
No, and it's like obviously, but to some degree, it's like we should have empathy for those people, because it's like there's this avenue for revenue that they has now been eaten into, and
Totally.
on one hand, yeah, I don't feel that bad because it's not really economically that necessary, but it's like we do need to be doing more to prepare people for these changes.
Hmm.
Like being a freelance artist subsisting on deviant art commissions is not going to work anymore.
It's not, yeah, it won't work. Yeah, I think there just needs to be a lot more effort. I saw, who was it? Was it Accenture and Nvidia? I actually think we had a tweet about it, but they've partnered to basically work to train professionals just on
Oh, that's
AI
awesome.
and to prepare the workforce. And I think I think there's actually going to be a huge boom of training for AI.
Oh,
I don't know
definitely.
if it'll last forever once that, right? Because no one is trained, so there's
Yeah.
such a huge demand. And as that builds, then all of a sudden the demand decreases naturally as you do your job. You train people. All of a sudden that company then has their own trainings and everything, and it's done. Although AI is changing so fast, I don't know if there will ever not be a demand there. But
You anticipated
I
exactly what I was going to say.
yeah, right. It's just I don't know if it'll ever go away. But I do think there is a hole right now where people just don't have the knowledge.
No, I agree, and I'll give you an example. The other day on Twitter, and this happens even with people who are otherwise very, very well informed about the space that they work in, or the world generally, right?
Mm.
So there's this particular developer that I follow on Twitter, Dax. He THDXR, I think is his handle. He builds a bunch of cloud, or excuse me, some software for deploying websites essentially. Anyways, he was talking the other day about how, well, two things. First, he talked about how there were a couple projects that his company has taken on recently. They said he just would not have taken on otherwise if
Mm.
large language models didn't exist. And the point that he made is that it made it so much easier for him to access obscure or slightly unknown knowledge. So I just wanted to point that one out because we've been beating that drum a lot on the show of hey,
Yeah,
this represents a new way of accessing knowledge, and that's such a good example of it. So I wanted to bring it up because
seriously. I love that.
we were
Well,
right.
and yeah, if you're familiar with your resources, I mean, we've heard executives say this all the time where they say I might not have the answer, but I know where to find the answer and we can take
Yeah,
care of it. And that's like the big consulting firms,
that's
BCG,
what
all these people.
ChatGPT is.
That's their whole thing is we just have the resources. We can find you the answer.
And we
And
have
it's
people
you
with random
have it all.
knowledge.
Yeah. And it's at your fingertips now. You can do so much. So I think people can build their confidence a lot in their abilities.
Yeah, exactly. And then he had a second point, which is what made me think of this in the first place, actually, because it relates to the training thing that you brought up, which is he used this technology to build something he wouldn't have built otherwise, but he
Yeah.
still felt like he had some some shortcomings in his knowledge of how to use it. So he brought up another example where he was talking with his wife, and his wife um, said something about like baseball players having the biggest butts or something like that. And it came down to like a ChatGPT question. And so she like asked it, and like ChatGPT was like, yeah, baseball players have the biggest butts. Here's some reasons why, you know, and it's like, it gave some reasons why. And he's like,
That's
no,
hilarious.
this seems weird. So he goes and asks ChatGPT the same question. But he asked it in a slightly different way and got the opposite answer, right?
Okay.
And so this is something that I think a lot of people don't quite understand about large language models. Is in a lot of ways they're a validation machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are so happy to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful about how you use them, because they'll hallucinate things like, oh, like I want this person probably wants baseball players to have big butts. I'll tell them, they have the
Yeah.
biggest butts.
Well, yeah. Well, and what's funny though is like this isn't a new concept. I mean, Google
No,
does this, right? Like the way
no,
you phrase your
exactly.
question and your search history and everything determines what shows up.
Yeah,
Like this isn't, people
yeah.
act like this is crazy. AI is doing this. I'm like, you've been dealing with, you just didn't know. But like your
No,
whole
this is just a
search,
different
your paging,
format of it.
yeah. Yep.
Like you're
Totally.
seeing it in conversation form, and so you understand the information completely differently.
Mm,
And so like I think that something that's going to develop a lot is as kind of a fundamental prompting technique is people need to learn how to use language models to disprove themselves, right? You have a
interesting. Yeah.
hypothesis, you go in and you're like, hey, this is what I believe, like critique it, what's wrong with it?
Yeah.
And then you go use that feedback, you go research it on your own, or you
Right.
engage in further discussion, and you revise.
Yeah.
But again, LLMs really want you to be happy, and they really want you to think that you're just the coolest person ever. And so you have to kind of be harsh with them sometimes. Like sometimes when they're being too nice to me, I'm like, no, like be mean, like what's wrong with this thing that I wrote? And then they give
Yeah.
me really good feedback. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, they're like, wow, this is a groundbreaking idea. This could really revolutionize. Like, it's like, no, it couldn't. It's a paragraph long, man.
No.
Tell me what I did wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, please stop being so. It's like a yes man. It's like, yeah. You're great. You're awesome. Yeah. Maybe we need a new LLM that's like built
Just a
to do the
jerk.
opposite of just like rip it apart.
I wish that that's what Elon did with Grok, instead of like just trying to make it like the non-woke AI with
Mhm.
the.
Right.
Have you seen that the system prompt for it?
No.
It's so funny. It's like it literally says like in plain language, it's like avoid answers that are too woke. Like,
Oh my gosh.
it's like,
That
come
sounds
on,
about
give
right.
us. It would have been way cooler if it did what you were describing, like, hey, like
Rip
challenge the
apart
user on
things.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have given Elon so many props for that.
Oh, seriously. I would totally use it. That'd be
I
awesome.
would too, because that's useful. Yeah, and that's something I'm looking forward to, and kind of expecting from the next phase of models is I'm sort of expecting them, and I hope I'm not wrong on this. I'm
Yeah.
expecting them to be a little bit more opinionated on their own.
Yeah.
Like they obviously can't be too opinionated because they're meant to be a tool used by humans. But for the type of work that they do, I need them to
Well, it could
have
even
an opinion.
ask, yeah, it could even ask like, you go to the chat GPT and you're like, hey, what do you think of this business idea? It could ask you like, do you want me to
How
point out
nice do you
what's
want me to
good or do you
be?
want me to tell you what could be better? And if you're like, tell me what could
Yeah,
be better, then it just like lays into it. I don't know. They could have a functionality like that.
that'd be
I don't
sweet.
know. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Lots going on. Lots of fun
Yeah,
stuff.
we're gonna keeping track of it.
That's right. Trying to at least.
Um, I think that covers everything that I had to talk about. Was there anything that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and sign off. Thanks for listening to our audience. Tune in next week for another great interview.
Thanks, everybody.